Hey guys, and welcome back to Weena Wonders. So I hope you're all doing well, and I hope that you are all safe at home. Recently, I've sort of taken a lot of time to get my head back in the game, and so I'm continuing this series that I began a couple of years ago, almost 5 years ago now, actually, like 4 or 5 years ago. And this series is called the Elements of Fiction series, and basically, I sort of take one element of fiction and talk about it and also give you guys some examples as a way of helping those of you who are creative writers really get in the zone, or maybe those of you who are looking to close read certain work or to really kind of focus on critiquing literature. I hope that this video and this series moving forward will be very informative for you guys, and yeah, I just hope that you enjoy it. I'll also leave a link to the playlist below in case you guys are interested in checking out the other videos that I did so far. Alright, so this video is going to focus specifically on points of view. This is the second POV video. So the first one addressed first person and second person, and now we're going to talk about third person. I decided to leave this sort of longer or later on in the series because I think that it really deserves its own video. So first, let's talk about the terms that we're going to be using in this discussion. So first, when I say third person, although most of you guys probably know this, let's just bring it up for those who might be a little bit confused, especially for those who might be relatively young in their literary journey. So when we say third person, that means that you are writing the narrative from the point of view of a disembodied narrator. So that's mostly he, she, it, they. So for example, first person would be I am sitting on the bed, and third person would be she is sitting on the bed. Another very important term that we need to talk about is psychic distance. So you guys might hear this a lot in forums and discussion videos, but I find that not a lot of people really go into what psychic distance means. So psychic distance pertains to the perceived distance between the reader and the events happening in the story. Okay, so for a series or sort of a body of literature that has very close psychic distance, something that keeps coming to mind would be the Shades of Magic series by V.E. Schwab. So I read that a couple of years ago and I really loved it, and I think that she was really able to use psychic distance to her advantage. So even when she was talking about a completely different world, you sort of felt very close to the things happening. A classic example of someone who uses big psychic distance to their advantage would be Ernest Hemingway. So Ernest Hemingway was known best for his writing that is very stark. In an Ernest Hemingway story, you never really get pulled into what the characters are thinking. Rather, he sort of leverages on that alienation effect and shows you what's happening. So he allows the reader to sort of infer what it is that the conversation is about. And that's not to say that there isn't one thing that the conversation is about. There is something that the conversation is about. It's just that he's not telling you directly. And I think that the advantage of something like that is it allows the reader to make up their mind about something. So I find that with Hemingway, he did that very effectively because a lot of the things that he wanted to talk about were controversial things, were sort of moral issues, were about the nature of relationships, and no one wants to be told what is right or what is wrong about those kinds of topics. So I think that that was very good. But if you're looking at something like Shades of Magic, which is more in the realm of like contemporary fantasy, I guess, it's okay to be a little bit more heavy-handed, I think. We'll be looking at three main types of third-person POV. The first one is objective, the second one is omniscient, and the third one is limited. Let's start with third-person objective. I feel like this isn't discussed as much as third-person omniscient and third-person limited, just because not a lot of people use it. So earlier I was talking about Ernest Hemingway, and I think that Ernest Hemingway uses this kind of technique. He uses third person objective, which means everything is happening kind of the way that it would happen in a play, where it seems like the setting is a stage and there's no pretense of this thing being real, What matters is the way that it looks, the position of the objects, what the people in the scene are saying or doing. So you are not given any access to what these people are actually thinking. Two prime examples of people who use this technique very well would be Donald Barthelme and Raymond Carver. I find that what those two writers have in common is that they were able to write stories that were engaging without being actively engaging, if that makes any sense. They're sort of stories that invite the reader to come and investigate them, as opposed to stories that reach out and try to tell the reader something or try to tell the reader whatever their story is. So if we were going to look at like a psychic distance meter, I would say that the psychic distance of stories by people like Ernest Hemingway, Donald Barthelme, and Raymond Carver would be like huge. As a reader, you feel almost completely set apart from the story. But then that also makes room for a different kind of engagement, which is that it allows you to continually think about this problem or to think about the situation. And if we are talking about, I guess, literary standpoints from which to view literature like this, then you can sort of think about it as this idea that the Russian formalists had, which was that you can see literature as an artifact of language. So you can see literature as something to be studied, as something to be seen, like as a separate object, and not necessarily something that is pretending to be real. And I personally think that this sort of point of view is very, very interesting, especially in short fiction or in long form fiction that's a little bit shorter. So the novella, as Hemingway was wont to write, or the short story, which Donald Barthelme and Raymond Carver both did very well. The next type of POV that I want to talk about is third person omniscient. So I think this is probably the most commonly used, if only because it affords you or the writer the most sort of narrative channels to branch from. So initially, I think I talked about the genre of fantasy. And I think that in fantasy, this comes in handy a lot just because there is the need to sort of flesh out all of these worlds and to flesh out different people. But that said, sometimes it can also cause your narrative to collapse just because there's so much detail and there's so many things that are mentioned, and that doesn't always make for the neatest narrative. But that said, is neat really the end goal anyway? Yeah, so the big advantage, I think, of the omniscient point of view is that it allows you to see the different motivations of the different characters. So a lot of the time when we are reading about a certain plot, we tend to have skewed notions based on what we know about a certain character. And because of that, sometimes certain narratives can look very black or white. It can seem very obvious, I guess, and sometimes even contrived. And when you sort of flip the POV or you make the POV so that there's more room to play and more room to show the motivations of different characters, then I just think that everything kind of falls into place. Another good example for the third person omniscient POV would be A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. So this book follows a character named Jude and sort of his journey through life, basically. And with a narrative like that, I think that the third person omniscient point of view sort of gives you some perspective when it comes to different characters in his life. So for example, Jude has a friend named JB, and of all of his friends, JB is the one who's a little bit more aggressive, the one who always feels kind of left out and who is always sort of picking a fight with everyone else in the group. And you might be tempted to sort of hate this character on the onset, but because of the point of view and because we sort of see certain scenes or certain things from JB's point of view, it sort of grays things out. And so that allows the reader to have a little bit more empathy for this character, and it allows the reader to not judge the character. And last but not the least, I want to talk about the third person limited POV. So in the third person limited POV, we are already kind of tiptoeing toward first person, where the disembodied narrator is really kind of a stand-in for one character only. So the best example of this that I can think of is Harry Potter. And in Harry Potter, I think the close psychic distance, or the relatively close psychic distance, and the fact that we are usually following what Harry is thinking actually makes for like a very good pivot in terms of plot, because we are biased towards Harry's biases. And if you'll notice throughout the whole Harry Potter series, Harry is usually wrong about things, and that allows for us to be surprised by certain plot twists. It allows for us to be caught off guard by certain character reveals that we might have spotted had we not followed that train of thought initially, or had we seen what all of these other people were thinking. Like, can you just imagine what Harry Potter would be like if we knew exactly what Snape was thinking? Right. With those three examples, we can really see the way that POV really affects how effective a narrative is, and also the different kinds of effects that it can have on a story, and in turn, the way that that affects the effect that it has on the reader. So I think that's it for this video. If you guys have any questions, please let me know in the comment section. And if you guys have read any of these books, or if you would like to argue with me a little bit about the POV in these books, or what you think about POV, whether it's that you have like a favorite POV, or whether it's that you think certain books don't do well in these POVs, please let me know. Like, I would love to have a discussion with you guys. And yeah, that's it for now. Thank you guys for watching, and like it if you like it, and subscribe if you haven't. I'll be back with more videos next week. Bye!